As part of the recent Financial Services Development Council Practitioner Speakers Series, hosted by the Open University of Hong Kong, Mrs. Florence Yip, Asia-Pacific Tax Leader of Financial Services at PricewaterhouseCoopers, spoke on the Belt and Road Initiative. In particular, she offered her perspective on how Hong Kong and Greater China can fully capitalize on the many business and investment opportunities created by closer partnerships with Belt and Road countries.
Today I'm going to share with you quite a slightly different topics called Belt and Road. But before I start my presentation, maybe I could ask the audience here. I see many young faces here. May I ask who are not students in the finance accounting faculty? Good. Only a few hands were raised. May I ask what subject or what course do you take?
Corporate administration.
Okay, very good. Chinese. Good, that's very good. Okay. I really admire and respect people who, of course, as a young person, you always need to balance between dreams and reality. But on the other hand, you are your own master. You can make your dream into reality. Now, no matter what subject that you learn over the 3 or 4 or 5 years at university, your future XX years. Now, science says now we can live up to 120 years. So maybe you have another 100 years to live. So maybe the next half of the 100 years, 50 years from another 50 years to learn. Now, things are changing. When I was at your age, I only knew about Silk Road. There was no Belt and Road Initiative. But now I'm standing here to share with you my experience and my insight and my questions about the Belt and Road and Initiative. Before I delve into that, I just give you I would say a helicopter view or high-level review of what Belt and Road is. Now, first of all, China, since it's opening up in the late 78 to 79, and it's the first opening up of China after the Cultural Revolution. Many of you were not born yet. Okay, China has opened up for like 30 years. Now, for many years, China's GDP growth has been at a steady growth rate of between 10%. You know, we have seen more than 10% before, but recent years it has dropped to below 7%, but it's still at a very staggering level of like very high level, 6.9. When you look at Japan, it's a negative percentage. Singapore's negative percentage. Now, so in China, after so many years of high growth, China's actually the wealth was, if you ask me, there was a good supply of cheap labor and cheap land and cheap natural resources. So in return, China accumulated wealth. At the same time, accumulated a large population of highly productive workforce, and also I would say some low to middle level of manufacturing know-how and machinery, etc. So if China need to continue its growth, it would need to find new markets. Now, of course, there are a good level of internal consumption level in China. After all, China has 1.3 billion people. But however, there would be certain saturated level in the future, right? So there need to be export. So China would want to, at the same time, stimulate not only the export, but also outbound investment. Now, that also leads to another very important topic of the China national policy, that is internationalization of RMB. Now, for some of you might be aware that RMB has effective in October this year become one of the SDR. Currency, right? One of the 5 SDR currencies, right? So it's a hard and long road for China to achieve over the past 30 years, before many of you were born, from such a backward country into the second largest economy in the world. We should be very, very proud of China's accomplishment, despite of many of its shortcomings. Now, so in addition to export of productivity, workforce, and resources, there's also an incentive or requirement or need for the outbound investment of China's surplus capital. There, China has a huge foreign exchange and also has a huge reserve. The China Sovereign Wealth Fund, actually I've looked at the table of the Sovereign Wealth Fund league table. Now, by the way, PwC has a special practice called Sovereign Wealth and Pension Fund. Last week I was in Sydney and we had a conference with the top 40 such fund tax directors in Sydney. And I looked at if China and Hong Kong and Taiwan added together, we have actually the largest sovereign wealth fund reserve in the world. So it's very, very remarkable. Okay. So over the past 30 years, many of you have already knew there was a city called Shenzhen. Actually, it's a special economic zone. Shenzhen, just across the border, you could go there to, have lunch, dinner, sauna, or shopping, or even now some people live there. So over the past 10 years, we have seen more development and opening up of China, including free trade zones, and we have seen a varieties of 跨境通, starting with the Hong Kong, Shanghai Stock Connect and the mutual fund recognition. Hopefully, before the end of this year, we'll have Hong Kong Shenzhen Connect, and hopefully in the future, we have the bond market opening up. But that is the opening up of the China domestic markets. How are we going to achieve the few objectives which I have highlighted in the orange boxes here, is from medium to high growth and from quantity to quality, from speed to efficiency. For example, in terms of manufacturing, I have heard from my clients that although China could say now send astronauts to the space, very, 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 they can do a lot of high-tech things, but they still need to import the small bearings from Germany because of the quality control. Now, I'm not a scientist, so I do not know the difficulty in producing reliable and hard-wearing small bearings one need to use in machinery. Okay. However, it seems China is still lack of this kind of know-how. Okay. So this is something that with the Belt and Road, one would be able to accomplish that, which I will explain later on how it could be accomplished. Now, it's a little bit of geography. Now, for those of you, I'm sure all of you have watched news or gone to the internet very often, so you already have heard of this many, many times. So for the Belt and Road, it covers the sea route and also the land route. So about 65 countries are to be covered. Right. Now, so many of the countries you may be familiar with, such Indonesia, India. However, many countries in the African continent and in the Middle East probably are quite still strange or news to us, right? Or even in the Central Asia region. Now, when I studied geography at school, many of those countries did not even exist. Okay, and I actually pity you because when you study geography, you need to remember all the spellings of those countries. That's quite difficult to spell. So for those who study geography, you had a fun time, right? Now, so talking about the Belt and Road Initiative, I could not mention this important body called AIIB, the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. It was formed or initiated by China. I think up to now there are 35 founding members, with many OECD countries being members as well, including UK, Singapore as well, and of course China and many countries in Asia and in Europe and Germany as well. So with AIIB, this is a map showing the 65 countries. You can see it covers a vast number of countries. Of course, what is missing from the map is the United States and Japan. So you could see there are a lot of countries involved. So in the future, when you plan your vacation, you may take it as a target to cover as many Belt and Road countries as possible. Now, there are some sound bites here, which I found very fascinating. The 65 countries included in the Belt and Road actually cover 1/3 of the global economy. 1/3 of the global economy. This is tremendous, right? Now, if you look at the project and the investments that the Belt and Road, since it started, you will see that it covers a lot of infrastructure projects. Now, I know for people in Hong Kong, when we think of infrastructure, we can remember, all those things happen, well, you see every day almost on the television. It's about the West Kowloon project, the Guangzhou Dai Kiu. In fact, I think if you ask me, Hong Kong has not spent or invested too much on public infrastructure projects in the past 10 years. However, now this is a super opportunity for us, for Hong Kong to be involved in the infrastructure projects. The reasons being, I will explain in the next slide. Now, you will see that there are some names I would hope you to remember after this 30 minutes presentation. One is AIIB, another one is China Development Bank, and the Export-Import Bank of China. Now, in China, other than the People's Bank of China, which is the central bank, actually there are 3 state policy banks: the China Development Bank, the Exim Bank, Export-Import Bank, and the Agriculture Development Bank. The 3 state policy banks are very high-level banks. They are not ordinary commercial banks. They have a special purpose to be involved in certain particular sector. So the China Development Bank and the Exim Bank both have presence in Hong Kong. In fact, many of the Chinese banks have set up presence in Hong Kong, and they, in addition to the Chinese banks, of course, we also have lots of banks from OECD countries and from non-OECD countries set up in Hong Kong. So many of them are directly or indirectly involving in the Belt and Road initiative already. Now, other than banks, actually financial services sector encompass not only banks, but there are insurance companies, leasing companies, and asset management companies, and wealth management, etc. I will explain more in the next few slides. Now, in terms of the money, the funding to spend in the Belt and Road Initiative, where does the money come from? On this slide, you will see that the money would come from the AIIB, $100 billion, the Silk Road Fund, which is one of the China government-run and set up funds, $40 billion from the Silk Road Fund, and also from the 2 of the 3 state policy banks, which I've just explained, the CDB, China Development Bank, and Exim Bank, Export-Import Bank of China, and then other commercial banks. However, the money is still not enough. If you can see the projected capital required for the Belt and Road Initiative, over the 10 years from 2015 to 2025, the amount required would be $10 trillion. Out of this, only a small portion, about 15%, would come from the few sources that I have just explained. Okay, so where does the remaining 85% come from? So that would come from other funding sources. Now, let me explain to you where those money will or can come from or may come from. So in addition to monies from the 4 types of, banks or Silk Road Fund or sovereign wealth fund, the PPP model is also highly recommended or promoted. The PPP is public-private partnership. So that means certain government, for example, Indonesian government or Hong Kong government or Australia government, so government and the private sector, they together would form a business venture together. Now, of course, in the process, there could be fundraising. But in this particular process, the fundraising, one particular sector would play an important role, which is called the asset management or fund management sector. Now, I personally have spent more than 10 years. Now, to you, 10 years is a lifetime. To me, 10 years is a fraction, split second. Okay, now, many years in Hong Kong, we have seen the number of funds and fund managers have grown and mushroomed. Now, there are different classes of funds. Now, for those of you who have no experience in little experience in investment, you may see advertisement of fund houses on the tram, on buses, on shopping mall. They are public funds, funds for the retail market. This is an important stream or segment of fund management. But there's another investment management sector called alternative investment. So public funds, retail funds, or traditional funds, authorized funds is one segment. The other segment is called alternative or unauthorized funds. The alternative segments, the growth rate is enormous, enormous. In the alternative investment sector, some of you may have heard the name called hedge funds, private equity funds, real estate funds, infrastructure funds, distressed assets funds, event-driven funds, or activist funds. So the fund managers, they are highly specialized. It's just like you. You study accounting, you study geography, you study music, you study politics. So each subject is highly specialized. So for asset management, for investment, it can be highly specialized as well. Okay, so for my clients, for example, I do a lot of client work as well. I do have infrastructure